So the first step on learning a freehand like this is to tell the doubting voice at the back of your head to shut the f up. This is so out of reach. I don't have the talent for this. I can't do that. Well, neither could I painting my first Bretonian Knight, and that was less than 2 months before I finalized this gold medal winning Imperial Knight. 2 months to get from this to this, and a whole bunch of nights in between. And I promise that you too can jump into freehanding after these solid pointers I'm about to throw at you like tomatoes at a pun club. So think of everything that follows like learning music. Rather than show you where to put your fingers to play a specific piece, instead, I'll give you the scales, practices, and reading tricks so you can play whatever f***ing piece you want, whenever you want. Because it's the same principles and skills to make this or this. The latter's just a needy little shit that loves monopolizing your free time. Now that you know that, I'll push aside a huge concern. Yes, at its core, freehand is traditional painting styles shrunken down to fit on your miniature. Obviously, knowing those Gucci techniques like glazing, wet blending, non-metallic metal, and more will help, but we won't need them to get the ball rolling. My beginner-friendly holy trinity of freehanding applies to everything from shoulder pads to gorgeous murals to flex on your opponent at the local tourney. So now that you're aware you don't need art theory classes 1 through 27, let's give you your first part of the freehand holy trinity: precision brushwork, or basically how to do curves, lines, and shapes at will. But Double D, I can't even do a straight f***ing line and you want me to— Hold up fam, I got you. 200 birds, 1 easy to fire flak cannon. Ever play Connect the Dots? There, now you know. Congrats, here's your diploma. Now go home. But in all seriousness, it's the best way for beginners to lean into the daunting task of precise brush control. Connecting 2 dots over a short distance is simple. Making multiple along a curved path makes it so you'll have a rough but decent curve to work with. But even when you got curves down, making a circle is a giant dose of what the f*** because of our good friend symmetry. But if you can't just eyeball swirl a circle, the dot method works here too. Simply make a cross with dots, then dot some on the diagonals. Add even more dots in between those to make a rough curve if you need those guidelines. Then connect away to a rather quick and painless circle. Shapes with corners should be self-explanatory, but they'll need a lot of repetition practice. If you're really struggling with making straight lines or gently sloped curves, try rotating the model so you're pulling the brush in a more controllable way for you. From there, all you need to do is carefully smooth any rough spots to make an eye-pleasing curve. Which leads to the other half of this foundational principle: understanding brushes. You've probably painted enough minis that you don't think too much about the brush bristles in action, but now you have to. You see, when most people start attacking freehand, they try to draw stuff on like you're using a pencil's firm tip. Pens and pencils are rigid, brush bristles flex, and arguing on the internet is about as effective as a broken condom, but people will do it anyway. Yeah, Dee, very obvious, so what's your damn point? My point is all that subconscious pressure you're putting on that point. Ease that pressure on the tip, and use that natural flex of your brush to your advantage instead of fighting it. While a pen is better at easily forming those corners using the previous dot method, the brush is better at making curvier transitions. It might not be as obvious on larger examples, but it's more obvious in smaller motions like what you're often dealing with on tiny miniatures. Not lifting pressure on those springy bristles when making a turn? Enjoy that drifting. But that natural smoothing effect from the bristles means they excel at making smaller curves look sexy smooth. Adding a little pressure in the middle of a line also naturally increases line width, so less follow-up strokes. Congrats! Now you know how I speedrun those squiggly filigree patterns. Press down, add pressure, wiggle, and lift. Press down, add pressure, wiggle, and lift. You'll get the hang of that after subjecting yourself through dozens of random filigree patterns, and then you can move on to crazier motions. And while we're on the topic of the brush, we'll take a moment to address several elephants in the room. No, synthetic or sable hair brushes don't really make that much of a difference, so just go with whatever good quality brush you trust best for finer details. Yes, the shape of the brush can help speed up a design. A gentle tap of your regular brush makes for stupid fast leaves. Double tapping is great for zombies and also makes that leaf look fuller per se. Anyone thinking about olive branches? Aside from the shape of the regular brush, go into your local art store and picking up a tiny ass filbert brush will give you a tool to slam out foliage of all kinds for almost zero effort. Bob Ross style. You don't need it, but God, once you have one, you wonder where it's been all your life. Just look at how dummy-proof it was to just belt out this forest backdrop. Having said that, the vast majority of my freehand is railed out with Monument No. 2 Sable, so you don't need super tiny brushes either. And as for paints, aim for trusted brands with super high pigment content. I've freehanded with a wide array of paints, but the Pro Acryl line is my go-to when all is said and done. The whole line slaps, no question. I wouldn't have even dared to use any other white making all these Titan murals. This is my only plug, I swear. Just like I swear by NordVPN. And before anyone says it, yes, my paint recommendations were acrylics based. I'd say oils are rather self-explanatory, because if you're using oils, you're probably already well read on what works best for minis. That said, go with what you like best or have. Paint choice is mostly about how much extra time you'll burn making colors opaquer. I'm looking at you, white and yellow. But speaking of time spent, we're going to go over the most time-consuming triad skill of freehand, but extremely important. Hence its place at the foundation level of the pyramid. Blocking with shapes. The way I speed through detailed murals is my simple approach that any complex image can be broken down into progressively smaller shapes. And when you start seeing images as an alliance of different size shapes, you will quickly grasp how you can create your own complex designs by laying down the silhouette. Those finer details can bloom later willy-nilly, but as long as you can draft that initial design, then you roughly know where everything else is going to go. Let's start with a shoulder pad example of a deceptively difficult design, the infamous insignia of plot armor. U's, especially elaborate ones, are hardly shaped on first glance. You got two rectangles, but how the flying f*** are you going to do that anxiety-inducing curve? The dot method could work, but the symmetry could easily f*** up, leading to more correcting than the 40k lore Reddit. Here's your hint. Don't limit yourself to adding shapes when you can also subtract. That U is almost like a circle, so if we plop down a circle, we're over halfway there. Don't forget to add those little rectangles at the top. Now all we gotta do is remove all this needless white with the original pad color. Make another small circle, and you got the rough draft for the ultramarine U. Now just layer the white 1,000 times to solidify it. For a more complex example, let's do my personal favorite icon for the banner, the fleur-de-lis. This top and bottom piece can be started with ovals, then sharpened with a single point at the far ends. These create triangles when you imagine extra dots on the sides of the ovals. Most of the triangle was already filled out, but that's just standard shape overlap. The remaining edges can be done as 4 different size circles. And like the Ultramarine's U, you simply remove another circle to form the arches. Then just connect the final parts with simple curved lines. And already it's starting to look like the symbol in question. With so many things going on, it's very easy for this symbol to be asymmetrical. But that's okay. Again, tell that panicking voice in the back to calm the f*** down and be patient. This is the blocking portion to get your mind seeing clearly, as if it were a raised icon on a base painted miniature. It's fine if it's rough, since you're just trying to map out where everything should go. You can always be open to possible impulsive fine details you can add much later. Congrats! You will no longer stare at complex designs in total confusion. Okay, maybe a little confusion at first, but you'll be mentally breaking things down in no time. Anything from shoulder pad heraldry to murals can be constructed using shapes in different variations and rotations. Even this organic lion head can be broken down into overlapping shapes, just as a proof of concept. Some things will just take way longer than the others by sheer virtue of how much blocking you gotta keep doing. So Double D, now that I'm getting the hang of simple freehand, how the heck do you leap up to those super elaborate ones? It's the third part of the triad, represented as the top of the pyramid because grasping it will complete the elegance of your freehand, so to speak. What, you mean you don't already know? Because I promise you, you do. You just haven't adapted it yet. Volumetric design. But you probably know it as base, shade, highlight. Base, shade, highlight. You've been doing it all along, but like identifying shapes, you just needed to know how to adapt it onto a less defined surface. When you're first learning, it's best to go with a top-down zenithal lighting scheme to add that volume and depth. It can be as simple as any designed edges facing the top of the model will use the highlight color. Then of course, any designed edges facing the bottom gets the shade color. It's a really basic build-up, but it's miles ahead of just using one color. Your results might not be worthy of an art gallery, but give yourself credit. You're just starting, and I guarantee that's going to look slick from 3 feet. Never forget the 3-foot rule when judging your own mini painting results. I introduced volume buildup as base, shade, and highlight, but you don't necessarily have to go in that order. As an example, I like to start with the shadow color to block in my imagery. Then I move up the color scale to end in highlights. Hence this clip of me covering up that yellow ochre silhouette I did before. I did that so the earlier example was easier to see. This is a good spot to mention a key point. Absolutely feel free to use reference images to help you along at any stage in your skill level, because not everyone can draw literally everything on command. For example, draw a sword. Looks plain Jane, but easy to think of, right? Now draw a corn berserker wielding a chain axe. Yeah, how many of you just opened Google or hollered at Alexa? Reference images help bring your designs to life through accuracy by depicting volume, lighting, and perspective. Just don't make an exact copy if doing murals, because that's effectively tracing or cloning someone else's work. And without enough creative additions or credit in the OG, you're gonna find yourself up shit creek with a hole in your boat. Unless you're copying faction iconography and other canon-friendly designs. Then that's just a no shit moment, and anyone who grieves you about it is being petty. So on to another gem of wisdom when it comes to freehanding. You can do it on any surface of the model when you're skilled enough, but that doesn't mean every single part of the model should be sporting that skillful drip. Just like everything can be a sex toy if you're brave enough, just because you could doesn't mean you should. This is because freehand's claim to glory is its Achilles heel. It's a big ass magnet for attention. A few tastefully placed freehand icons or designs can give your entry a powerful edge in competitions. Likewise, too much or poorly placed freehand will sabotage your work. So as powerful of a concept as freehand is, it's important to understand when it's appropriate to apply to the model and how. But that in itself is extremely subjective. Example. A Bretonnian knight covered in freehand is perfectly fine because it's a pompous, arrogant noble that wants nothing more than the dick measure in front of filthy peasants. Conversely, a totally filthy peasant carrying around a beautifully free-handed banner? Nuh-uh. Don't be so quick to dismiss it as a questionable decision when it's still viable. The pompous knight fell in battle, and now a peasant takes over the role to keep morale high. Or maybe the peasant mob just caved the snobby knight's skull in and now they're rushing off to the pawn shop. Narratives are sweet brownie points for a model or diorama, so as long as you can tell a compelling story, you can feasibly get away with an abusive amount of freehand. Again, a case-to-case basis, and your mileage will vary. If a freehand area is big enough, I will also sometimes finish one section to varying degrees before truly finalizing an area, like you saw with the Forest Hills backdrop. Its volumes were completed well before shaping even began on the fleur-de-lis. You'll come up with your own preferred methodology in no time, and as long as it's comfortable for you and makes you happy, then you're on the right track. Once you get a lot of practice with the holy trinity of precision line work, shape blocking, and volumetric design, you're ready to tackle any freehand in your way. If it wasn't for all the little what-ifs. Because it's always something, ain't it? So at this point, I'll finally address some obnoxious heckles from the back of your mind. The one that's screaming, well, this is all cool and exciting, but what's the fucking point if my hand shakes like a chihuahua after 20 lines of coke? And that really is a crippling point. Shaky hands are about as fun as a floater in the punch bowl. There's 1,000 reasons why it's happening and 1,000 more possible solutions. But for the sake of everyone's time, let's rapid fire troubleshoot the most common issues that aren't tremors related. Don't grip the brush like you're falling off a cliff in an overdone TV trope. Relax your fingers. You don't need much pressure to let that paint flow if you thinned it properly. Stop holding your breath. Holding your breath just makes you shakier because you're depriving your blood of oxygen and slowly adding some muscle fatigue. Take deep, normal breaths and be amazed how much steadier your hands get. There, a free 10-second biology trivia to go with your back alley art class. Painting with your elbows on the table isn't as steady as painting with as much of your hands in contact with the table as possible. Less muscles you're using, the less possible shake factors in play. It's impractical to paint minis like this in most cases, but for freehanding, it should feel more like you're drawing on a notebook. But if you insist on having your elbows propped up, at least find a pile of books or something to lean against like a tripod. And as a related pointer, sit comfortably. You'd be surprised how any discomfort can resonate through the rest of your body over time. Plus, it's good for your health. Also, hydrate properly, because that too introduces shakiness, along with a whole host of other potential issues that are best avoided. I really don't think I need to mention this, but you probably shouldn't freehand right after inhaling enough sugary sweets or coffee to kill a pig. Wait a bit before starting, unless you're going for challenge mode. And as a tip for you gym rats, if you kill forearms that day or the day before, you probably won't be getting any steady freehand in either if you went hard. Another case of artistry and fitness colliding. That was a lot of quick pointers, but to round this all out, here's even more extra tips to keep you on the right path to becoming a freehander. With the first being, realize when it's really just a bad day to freehand. Sometimes you or your body just can't that day, and that's alright. Well, unless you have a deadline, but you're the one who probably introduced that impatient mother-in-law. Can't help you there. But you can still adjust accordingly. Just because you can't freehand doesn't mean you can't do other parts of the process. Like researching other designs you want to make or replicate. Spitball another idea you'd like to try elsewhere? Maybe rough draft practice the design on a piece of paper so you're more aware what needs to be done when you can freehand. Plus, that extra design practice can help you with dealing with the hardest technical hurdle of freehand. Those asinine folded contours on capes and flags. Those require you to tilt and angle your model differently to make sure your image is coming out naturally bent. But there is some good news. If you have some f***ups, they're probably not as noticeable, because the whole image is skewed. They're a pain, but not mold shift on plasma coils painful. But you know what else is rough? Dealing with freehand on carefully glazed surfaces. Because your design might have nicely faded areas that would just love to catch an accident. Unfortunately, there's usually no other recourse but to reblend that area. Or you could turn to the glorious fixer.
You must be truly desperate to come to me for help.
Seriously, it's the worst kind of painting accident next to spilling paint thinner on your model. Prevention is your best bet here. I recommend blocking in everything in their darkest colors if you're nervous. Then do the background blend to your brightest color. And after that, you can simply go over the silhouettes again with their colors and start building volume from there. All while anxiously praying you don't mess up the finer details. I wish I had an easier solution for you, but the greatest glory often waits behind bullshit, stress, and accidents. I mean, that's what the trials of Heracles were. Lots of bullshit, stress, and accidents. Which leaves us with the most important dead horse that needs a daily beating. Seriously, don't compare yourself to others when you're scrolling Instagram. That goes for results and progress. We all have different situations, so just because someone is zooming past you on the highway doesn't mean you have to tailgate them to your exit ramp. You have your own valid reasons for your pace. If anything, use their works as motivation and extra drive. It's your art, not theirs or that random burner account in the comments trying to be relevant for a hot second. The more you refine your skills in each of the 3 parts of the Trinity, the more you'll see your freehand designs bloom. Just be sure to practice the foundational 2 first, because volumes and detail are heavily reliant on their groundwork. And if you found all this helpful or eye-opening, maybe you'll be interested in another of my crass-filled tutorials. Either way, thanks for stopping by. Have a f***ing awesome day, and I'll see you next time!